but you absolutely mustn't withhold information because that just looks dodgy. So if you don't know something, say, we don't yet know, but we're going to be doing our damnedest to find out. That's the kind of thing you need to be doing. Okay, so this is not rocket science, and I'm sure most multilateral businesses already know this, and they don't need someone from government who's not worked in the private sector telling them this. Of course, you diversify and hedge your bets, so you're never over-reliant on one country, one supplier, or one market. But you can see that in the geopolitical sphere as well. You see small to middle-sized countries, especially in today's world, where the US is casting doubt about its willingness to play the world's policeman and its reliability as a partner. You see quite a lot of middle-sized countries hedging their bets. They don't want to burn their boats. They don't like China. But if you're not sure about where the US is and whether the US will continue to back you up, you're going to hedge your bets a little bit. And so you can see that in the geopolitical sphere as well. And ever since COVID, and with the rise of Donald Trump and with the threat from China, you see a lot of countries thinking we need to spread our bets, we need to have a wider source of suppliers, we can't rely upon China, we can't rely upon one country for the source of our medicines or critical drugs. So there's a strategy of de-risking and onshoring. So that's sort of kind of in the business sphere. I'll talk about something more direct from my own diplomatic experience when in every embassy I've served, and most recently when I was ambassador in Georgia, the answer is you just have to plan ahead. You have to have your plan A, and you have to have a plan B, and you have to have a plan C. Every embassy I ever worked in had something called a risk register, and we all absolutely hated it. It was something that was incredibly tedious to draft, and we rolled our eyes when management in London said, "Have you updated your risk register?" But it did make me sleep better at night knowing we had it. And the risk register is you have a chart of what are the things that could possibly go wrong. What is the likelihood of that thing happening? And what is the impact of that thing happening? And that could range from, could there be a coup? Or could there be political unrest, an uprising? Could there be a contested election? To a natural disaster, or a plane crash, a flood, or an earthquake, or a rise in corruption. So all those are the kind of things that we would try and form an assessment. What's the likelihood of that happening in this country? And what would the impact be on our operations or on British interests? And so what's our mitigation plan for that? And we would sort of be red, amber, green. What are the most serious things and what is the likelihood of them happening? And then we had a plan for that. So yeah, it was a bit tedious doing that. But when we did it, I always felt a little bit better. The other thing we always had was an emergency plan, which we were required by London to test twice a year. If there was a coup or if there was a major natural disaster, what are our contingency plans? If the embassy shuts down, what's our fallback location? Do we have the phone number of all our staff? And do we have a plan for contacting them in emergency? Do we have a backup electricity generator? Do our staff know what their roles are in a crisis? So we had, and actually I think the Foreign Office was really, really good about this. Our emergency plan included having a gold crisis manager, which when I was ambassador was me, silver crisis manager who managed the teams and made sure everybody knew their role. And then there was a bronze backup manager. Each person had a role. Somebody was making sure our platforms worked, our IT worked. Somebody was in charge of communications, making sure we were putting out information to the public, briefing the media. Somebody was in charge of liaising with the local government. So then you have to have a duty roster so that people aren't working 18 hours. So we all had that in hand. And then again, I have a classic anecdote because I always have a good anecdote. keep those plans on hand. I had a friend who was ambassador in a Latin American country, and a natural disaster occurred there. And their crisis plans were locked away in the secure part of the embassy, and they couldn't get to it. So it was stupid. Make sure you have your plans to hand. So those are my things. Plan ahead, have a backup plan, have people know what they're supposed to do. I really, really think this is important. It's possibly the most important element of a crisis. Let's say you're a company, Boeing, for the sake of reference, since it always seems to be Boeing, and one of your planes has crashed. Let's say you're a diplomat and there's a natural disaster, the plane has crashed and there are British passengers on board. You absolutely must communicate. You want to get ahead of the story. You mustn't look as if you're hiding anything. You must communicate what you know and communicate what you don't know. Don't be afraid to say so, otherwise people will think you're trying to hide something. The other thing is designate a spokesperson. Don't have different people all going out and doing different media. In the British Foreign Office, generally the ambassador is the spokesperson, and we were told, be visible. If you can get to the scene, go to the scene, show that you're caring, show that you're on the ground. Accept as many interviews as you can, be out there, but just have that one spokesperson so you don't have different people giving out different messages. Put out updates so have a backup team who are putting out updates on social media. And if you can, set up an emergency hotline for members of the public who may be affected by the crisis to dial in and get the details of that hotline out. And the idea is that you want to project calm and strength. You want to be ahead of the story, and you want to look as much as possible as if you're in control of the situation, that you're taking action and that there is a plan. So let's say you're briefing the media. We don't yet know the full extent of the casualties, or we don't yet know what caused the disaster, but we've arranged for an emergency team to visit the site. Consular officials are reaching out to potential affected families, or the situation is too volatile for us to get a situation on the ground, but we are setting up emergency facilities. And as soon as the government and the authorities tell us it's safe to go there, we will be there. We're working closely with the local authorities. You want to look as if you're doing something, you're handling it, and you have a plan. But you absolutely mustn't withhold information, because that just looks dodgy. So if you don't know something, say, we don't yet know, but we're going to be doing our damnedest to find out. That's the kind of thing you need to be doing. I'm a bit nervous to answer this question because I'm not the business person here. The people listening to this who actually are in the business world, they're the ones with the experience and the expertise to know about how to make profit. I'm not going to talk about that, but I am going to talk about positive impact because that's something that matters in government as well. And I think the idea in government and in business is you need to have a wide definition of who your stakeholders are. It's not just the immediate business partner or your immediate people who you're trying to persuade to buy your product. It's up and down the supply chain. It's up and down the region in where you're working. So as ambassador, I always used to say, well, obviously my most important stakeholder is the government of the country that I'm posted to. It is also the people of that country. My job is to project a positive image of the British and the British government and our policies to the people as a whole. Because if the people have a good image of the British government, then they're going to support their government working closely with us. Whereas if they look like all we care about is our bilateral relations with the government of the day, how does that make the opposition feel? How does that make ordinary people feel? If they don't like their government, and they just see the British working hand in glove with their government and not really caring about the ordinary people, that's going to have an impact. That's going to blow back. So I used to make a real effort to explain British government policy, not just to my government interlocutors, but to the press. I used to travel around the country. I used to talk to as many different people as possible to try and build that wider sense of this is what Britain is, this is what the UK is. So I would say that's good advice in business as well. Have as wide a definition as possible of your stakeholders. And remember, the people who you're currently doing business with, they may change over time. You need to have a broader reputation. And in Georgia, which was my last foreign posting, I would say that BP, that was the biggest British investor there, and in fact, one of the biggest companies they had at all in Georgia, they were very, very good about understanding that wider stakeholder issue. So they had these huge oil and gas pipelines going across Georgia, and they made a huge effort to engage with communities all the way along the length of that line. They supported the construction of roads, of infrastructure, they sponsored schools, they sponsored community colleges, they helped people get jobs. They sort of tried to be corporate, socially responsible, and to have support from within the community. There's nothing worse than the experience of looking like you're the ugly multilateral business, just doing deals with corrupt governments and pushing villagers off their, historic lands. You don't want to be that company. Have a wide definition of your stakeholders. Right, this is a really nice last question, and I think it matters more than ever in today's world, which is definitely more polarized. We see a rise in populism, we see a rise in disinformation. Our societies feel quite divided. There's certainly uncertainty, there's geopolitical uncertainty. There's the sense, do values matter anymore? Does international law matter anymore? Do principles matter anymore? Is it all just might is right? And I like America. I like Americans. I'm not a huge fan of the Trump administration. I think the Trump administration is casting doubt on some of these international norms and standards. And I want to make the old-fashioned case that these things still really matter, and that good values, principles, and ethics matter in policy. They matter in government, and they matter in business. And people who dismiss this as wishy-washy idealism, and we can't afford that, we have to be hard-headed realists, are making a big mistake. We talked earlier on about ethics, and these things matter. If you cut corners, if you try and cheat people, if you mislead people, these things will come back to bite you. The best partners in international relations are the countries that still try and adhere to international norms and that treat their own citizens well. Human rights are not a luxury. Democracy is not a luxury. Free press, free information is not a luxury. People make better decisions when there's transparency, when there is freedom of information, when there is the rule of law, and governments are held accountable for what they do. You get better policy in the longer term. So don't listen to those siren voices that tell you we can't afford these wishy-washy, woke nonsense. That's wrong. Ethics matters, and good policy and good values go hand in hand. That's what I want people to take away.